Madam Chair? At the bottom of page 3, we have senior transportation. There's a significant decrease there. What is that attributed to?
Well, as you see, it's in salary and wages, which reflect a change or a decrease in staffing.
How many were laid off? Are we changing the way we provide that service?
Yes, we have a full-time staff person here. Part-time staff is not included.
So the part-time staff has been laid off.
I'll let the mayor address that. I'm not sure just where he is in his plan.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
So the change in salaries and wages, what is that attributed to in senior transportation?
Well, we had one retirement and one part-timer who quit. That were van drivers, and their hours were picked up by volunteers. And the other remaining 4 drivers.
How has the service been affected?
Hasn't been affected at all. Everyone's still getting their hot meal and still going for dialysis and doctor's appointments when they need to go.
Madam Chair?
We good?
On page 4, oh, never mind, Councilwoman Jones asked that question already. Page 5, mechanics, we have total mechanics. All of that, there's no expenditures in mechanics. Why is that?
I think we discussed at the last meeting that this service will probably be outsourced. And so the staffing for that, I think we discussed that one was resigned, the other mayor,
Yes,
the mechanics.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mayor.
We had one individual who resigned who took a job in another community, as you all know. We have currently our only mechanic has decided to work for about 4 to 5 more weeks so he can get his 30 years in, and he will retire on September 1st. At that point, that will leave us with no mechanics, so we will either hire a part-time mechanic or outsource that particular department. We haven't opened that discussion yet.
How much expense do you intend to incur? I'm sure it's not zero in fixing our vehicles.
Well, if you have a crystal ball, I don't. I don't know outsourcing what they would charge. We have not looked into it yet.
Is that included in another line item?
It would not be. What, outsourcing is included?
No, I mean, some of the vehicle repairs are included in special revenues under ambulance billing. The police and fire department, if you notice, have no other administrative expenses, just payroll in terms of the general fund. Their expenses are in the ambulance billing, which is not part of this report because it's not a deficit fund.
So you're saying that the repairs to fire and police vehicles are coming out of the ambulance billing line item?
In another fund.
Yeah.
They're in another fund, it's in a special revenue fund.
Uh-huh.
For the majority, I mean, some comes out of mechanics. But the goal is to, for next year, to align those with the department that's incurring the expenses. But right now, they're all lumped together.
So has that, you said next year planning to divide the repairs for the service department, put that in under service department, and fire, put that in fire, and police and police,
We
divide
do
them all?
plan to do better tracking. The only reason it was not done here is that we have no historical data. So when we collect that, these numbers for the 2015 budget will probably shift some. And that's true as we spoke about a lot of the line item expenses. I have my staff currently trying to collect data so we can establish a base for supplies, operations versus putting everything in other administrative expenses.
So should we expect a portion of this 227 to be in fire, and a portion of it be in police, and a portion in service at some point in time?
Not necessarily. Like I said, we need to do that analysis to see exactly, because there's other things that go into other mechanics, other administrative, you have supplies, different kinds of expenses that may not all be attributed to repairs. I don't have that listing in terms of exactly all of the different, but it's anything other than personnel. So it could be a lot of different expenses. And again, this is taken from historical data, so.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Under the mayor's office and fringe benefits, that's on page 5. Mayor's office and the fringe benefits, we see a $15,000 reduction, almost $15,000 in the fringe benefits. What's that attributed to?
The difference in the health plan, one was a family, that person is leaving, the next one has a single plan, so the fringe benefits will go down.
Everything else will unfortunately come from your salary for the coming next election.
Well, that's,
Can't hear you.
Well, I think it was.
Anybody hear that?
No. There's at the next election, council voted to decrease the salary of the mayor. I didn't know if that was reflected in this or not.
No, it's not. If I recall, I think it was reduced to 80,000, if I remember. So I will make that adjustment.
Irene, if you go to page 7, the mayor's court, are you being really conservative with the amounts for 14 and 15?
I'm sorry.
What page is that?
Page 7, the mayor's court. It's just one person we have there.
Right, you have one person there, and like I say, the expenditures, basically, there will be supplies, there's very little. And a lot of things that we're planning to do instead of order printed personnel, I know it's specific and unique to the mayor's court.
And then the magistrate too.
Yes.
And the magistrate.
Okay, all right.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Page 5, Finance Department. Other pay has 40,000 listed in 2014, has nothing listed in 2015. What does that change typically?
We discussed at the last meeting, those are payouts. There was a couple of staff persons that left, Mr. Vargo and Clapan in 2014. I did not anticipate or project that anyone would be leaving that would require a payout in 2015. Could be, but when the time comes, we'll put it in.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
On page 6, under lands and building, if I remember correctly, we had a discussion about some of the electric bills were being paid from the wrong place. The electric bill, how much was that was being paid out? And is that reflected in this? This is, I would assume, utilities under lands and buildings where that amount that was being paid out of the wrong place was transferred to.
Right. Excuse me, I have a cold. From previous discussion in the minutes, it was reflected that not all of them, a significant amount was charged to the special revenue levy. And that's one of the reasons it was running a deficit. So we, in the process of researching the street lighting fund. So if you refer back to the amended appropriation that was approved by this body, you will see those changes because there's a change column. And so we discussed that at the time that we went through the amended appropriations.
So some of the utilities were mistakenly being assessed on the street lighting fund, or to the street lighting fund.
Well, not utilities per se, it was the electric bill, not all
Okay.
utilities.
Electric bill.
Mr. Lightfield. Mhm.
The electric
So we're
bill.
doing a research now to properly record those numbers and to determine a base of what it really is, because it affected that particular fund, which showed up as one of the deficit funds
Yeah.
in the fiscal watch.
And how much
We projected about 200 to 250,000 out.
was mistakenly charged there?
Right. If I may direct your attention back to the amended appropriations that was approved. It's on page 7 and 14. Lands and building, under utilities. It was originally projected at the beginning of the year for 200,000. When we amended the budget based on the research and analysis, we raised it to 500, which is a $300,000 change.
Any further questions from council?
Yes, ma'am. On page 7, at the top there, economic development. So we are not planning to have any more economic development then?
I
More
defer to
correct.
the mayor.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes?
there's nothing forecasted for expenditures under economic development. Why is that?
Well, currently, the city engineer has taken on the duties of the block grants, the issue 1 grants, the OPWC funding. My office, along with the building commissioner, has been dealing with any current new developments such as Southgate, the McDonald's project, which commenced again last week. And so we haven't really received any resumes or candidates that had the experience and quite what we were looking for. So the job is still posted, it's still active, but to date, we haven't really received anyone or anything from anyone that we'd like to interview yet. So at the time, if we feel that we can come back to city council, and I believe that's a position that city council has to approve after my recommendation anyways. So at that time, you'll have an opportunity, if it presents itself, to interview that person and ultimately decide if you want to hire him.
So the engineer and you said your secretary are picking up?
No, but just my office, myself, yeah,
Uh-huh.
myself, the building commissioner. And I think the law department has caught some overflow also.
And me.
Well, you have to raise your hand
And
and
me.
let us know. Yeah, it's kind of a joint effort. If you'd like to volunteer, there's always room for one more. It's him.
It got to me.
It's him.
What's that little bug flying around?
It's his phone.
Madam Chair,
Okay, are we almost finished here? Mr. Brownlee, are you almost finished?
we're working on it, yeah, I think so.
Okey-dokey.
On the last page, page 9, we have the traffic camera estimates. Would we be able to see, or would you be able to explain how exactly you came to those numbers, those specific numbers?
I
Your process?
think I did.
Okay. Would you please explain the specific procedure you went through to get those numbers?
There was a survey taken in 3 days by the police and or its associates. And based on those 3 days, the city would net about 190,000 plus. So instead of multiplying that by 10 to represent 30 days, I just multiplied it by 5 for 15 days. And then I took 40% of that, assuming that we would not collect everything. And then I multiplied it by 3.
Did, anywhere in your figures, did you figure in that someone can only be cited twice in a month?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I mean, I have no way of knowing how many drivers will only be cited twice, or even how many different drivers. You can assumption can be made that all of these are, some may be duplications. I mean, they may not be unduplicated drivers, so I wouldn't know that unless, once we get some history and maybe some records or logs from the police department. This is a new venture, we have no historical data for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the calculations that I ran, it looked to be about 1,200 speeding drivers every day. But each of those people could only be cited twice, so you wouldn't want to multiply it by 30, you'd want to multiply it by 2. So it would give you a very different number. Then you would take 40% of that number, and it looks as though when all the cameras are up and running at the very first, they would bring in $232,000. But the police chief and actually the representative from Up Traffic informed us that the number of citations drops significantly. After 3 months, I think for 2 months, it dropped down to 70% of what was being collected before, and then about 3 months, it drops down to, I think it was 30% of what was collected at the beginning. So that's a significant drop. When I ran the calculations, it came to a number significantly lower than yours. Is that estimate something that you would reconsider, that we could make sure that we have our estimate amount correct?
I think we discussed this very lengthy during the amended appropriation session, and I think this number has already been quote-unquote approved in terms of the budget. So this body would have to submit an amended appropriation budget to change the number.
Well, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, would you consider that maybe that number, that estimate is too high? Would you consider that? At
this time, no. Until we actually receive our first month of revenue, I think this discussion would be more appropriate. But based on statistics and mathematical calculations, this is the number I came up with. I don't have a crystal ball either. So after we collect for a month or so, then we can come back to the table to say, this is not a good number, so let's amend the budget. But right now, I think it's a moot issue.
Madam Chair, Bill, these are also portable cameras. So your figures might hold true possibly if we kept them stagnant on Warrensville or Broadway, but if they're going to be moved to Warrensville, Rockside and around the school zones, I mean, they're not going to be in one spot for a long time. So
Yeah, as I understand it right now, they won't be moving.
Really?
Yeah, at least she said they will not be moving. This is a whole process that needs to be undertaken. There's a test survey that needs to be taken, then they have to be moved by the people, then they have to be calibrated. So it's quite an involved process to move a camera. It's not a matter of backing up the truck and pulling it to a different location.
Well, be mindful too that this was just a snapshot of one location. My understanding, there's going to be several locations for the camera, which was not part of this projection. So even if that particular location does not meet this target, maybe with the others combined, it may.
Yes.
I figured in with all 4.
I understand, I'm sure your numbers are good, but again, if council wants to go and amend the budget, that's their prerogative. But at this point, the number stands, because this is the official record. So, I mean,
Okay,
One more
thank you.
question, Madam Chair. We had talked few days ago, and I asked at a meeting about how much of a negative balance could the Treasury stand, negative balance in the general fund. I wondered if you had a chance, you said you couldn't comment at the time, but how much of a negative fund or negative fund balance in the general fund could the Treasury withstand?
Well, technically, once it reaches zero, you don't write checks to bounce. But again, the balances, a lot of the money is encumbered. There's different pots to go into there. Some are receivables, so it's hard to just say. But, right now, we are still able to pay the bills. So,
Tomorrow, would you be able to provide for us a statement of cash position?
yes, you'll get one probably in the mail. My staff is mailing out the June 30th position, financial statement, so you should get those tomorrow.
Could we have one at the meeting tomorrow in case it doesn't come in the mail,
Sure.
the most recent one?
That'd be email, Irene.
Yes, Kevin is planning to send a PDF.
So I'm sure you don't need to have it sent mailed to your, is that what you're wanting to do?
I'm sorry, they won't be mailed, they'll be emailed.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Irene. We appreciate your time. This is again a first reading.
Madam Chair.
And we will be moving on to the next piece of legislation, which is
Madam Chair.
2014-61.
Just a question. This is only the general fund. We don't have all the rest of the funds.
Correct. As I stated, first of all, the only funds that we will have are those that's in deficit. And at the beginning, I mentioned that there are several components to this, and that you have only the general fund. You do not have the narrative. You do not have the action plan. And then you do not have those 3 or 4, which basically are self-sustaining funds through special revenues. So that won't be as detailed. It's just basically probably 1 or 2 line items on them.
So since we don't have all the pieces, we shouldn't put this on a first reading. I understand we should.
It is on a first reading already.
Well, how can we have it when it's incomplete, have first reading and there's not all the information? How can we say, look, we've considered, we don't have all of it, we just have one piece?
Well, you have the general fund, that's what you have, which is the most significant fund, or the most attention and the largest deficit.
I think it would be more appropriate to postpone consideration of this formally and put it on first reading. We should postpone that until we have all pieces of the plan considered.
That's not my decision, so.
It's already on a first reading. We've already announced it, so we're fine with that. And
Madam
agree-
Chair, I would
and-
move to postpone this until we have all of the pieces. We can't have a first reading with not all the pieces of the legislation in hand. I make a motion to postpone this to tomorrow evening's meeting for the first reading.
There is no second, so we shall move on to 2014-61, please.
Ordinance number 2014-61, an ordinance amending section 1484-04 and 1484-05 of the codified ordinances, decreasing the fees for notice of foreclosure properties in the city of Maple Heights and declaring an emergency.
This is also a first reading.
Resolution number 2014-62, a resolution authorizing the mayor and the law director to negotiate a lease contract with SBA Towers 5 LLC for perpetual easement agreement of a cellular tower site at Denham Park in the city of Maple Heights and declaring an emergency.
This resolution is also on a first reading.
Madam Chair, any question concerning 2014-62?
Go ahead, Mr. Brownlee.
Here in the ordinance, it lists in the second whereas clause, it says the council would like to proceed for a 110-foot tall monopole telecommunications tower. That, I presume, does that mean it's not supported by guy wires, guy lines or anything?
It's regulated by the federal people, and I think that they pretty much would be knowing if there's any.
The one thing I saw in the contract is that we're leasing a 50-foot by 50-foot area, but they also, in the contract, we're giving them the right to run any guy lines that they may need for their tower, which would be the wires that run out to support it.
Then that's the contract.
So
That's
the
your
question
answer.
is that what we will be, is that will be installed, a tower that needs these guy lines, or a tower that does not need guy lines?
I'll check for you.
But if it's in the contract, we're going to assume that we're following the guidelines.
I guess, I can't imagine any wires being run into, but that's a good question.
Because a 50-foot area is one thing, having wires out who knows where is another thing.
Moving on, please.
I'll find out for you by tomorrow.
Thank you, John.
Resolution number 2014-63, a resolution urging the Cutter County Council to pass ordinance number 02014-0014, an ordinance introduced by Cutter County Executive Edward Fitzgerald, establishing the Cutter County Property Demolition Fund to eliminate abandoned and blighted properties in Cutter County and declaring an emergency.
This resolution is also on its first reading. And that concludes our legislation part.
I have a question
We
about
also,
2014-63.
can you wait until tomorrow and we'll be discussing these? We'll have a
I'd like
discussion on
to
it.
discuss it tonight.
I think we're finished.
I have a question for the introducer.
I think we're
I'd like to hear,
finished.
I'd like to hear your comments on it.
You will, tomorrow. We have
You're
another
not gonna
meeting
entertain
tomorrow.
discussion
No, I'm
tonight?
not. No, I'm not.
That's why nothing is explained.
We have a special meeting tomorrow night, and hopefully we'll have a few more council people attending so that we can pass some of the pieces on the agenda. And then we will also have another meeting next Monday on the 28th, which will also be the date of a finance meeting. So we're going to be combining events here. But we hope to have the plan, the recovery plan, complete the presentation, and we'll be good to go. And with that, since there is no further business this evening, this meeting is adjourned at 7:05, please. And thank you for coming.